Shalom Israel, grace and blessings from God the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ be unto you. All praises to the Most High that we made it another week learning the Word. All right, y'all, forgive me for my slight tardiness. I do want to check and make sure everything's functioning properly. It seems like it could be having issues. Let me see. YouTube might be all right. Facebook looks like it was having a little issue. Let me check and see though. Jump over here. What are we looking like? Jump over here. All right. What are we looking? We look good on YouTube. We do look good on YouTube. So all praise to the Most High for that. Let me check Facebook. How we looking on here? Are we all right? Let's see. Are we good? Jump over here. What are we looking like? All right. All praise to the Most High. It seems all right. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this sound off. Y'all go ahead and do the whole algorithm stuff. I hate saying it, but the like and the share and specifically and more specifically, I guess I should say, what I care most about is like, if you have any questions or anything like that, ask in the comments. I'll try to get to them before the end of the lesson. All right. So everything seems to be functioning properly. Let me go ahead and just bring this on down. We'll go ahead and get started. That looks good about right there. All right. So as y'all can see by the title, pride is the devil. I actually got that one from that J. Cole song. I called it that. I haven't heard that in a while, but that's a good name. But if you don't like that name, you say, well, I don't like that name. Be not puffed up is a more biblical name. And we'll read a scripture here briefly, talk about being puffed up, right? But first, as we do every week on learning the word, we start with 2 Timothy 2 and verse 15. Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth, right? So study to show yourself approved to God, not to men, all right? Show yourself approved unto God, right? Let every man be a liar. Let God be true, but every man a liar. All right? You'll never be ashamed if you work at it, as it said, a workman, rightly dividing the word of truth. You'll know how to rightly divide the word of truth. Not just go through your doctrine, how to justify your doctrine, but you'll know how to justify doctrine, period. You'll know how to build upon the doctrine that God establishes. All right? So, with that being said, let's start with 1 Corinthians chapter 8. And we'll read we'll start with 1. 1 Corinthians 8, and starting with verse 1. Now, as touching things offered unto idols, we know that we all have knowledge, right? So I don't necessarily want to talk about the things offered unto idols. That's a different class entirely. But just the point that we all have knowledge, but knowledge puffeth up. Understand that thing. The more you know, the more inclined you'll be, the more susceptible you'll be to having pride, right? Because you start learning some things, you start thinking of yourself as being something exceptional, when really everyone who learns things is like that. They become, they have like a superiority complex, at least on that specific subject. They think they know everything about that specific subject in the very least, right? And when you start to learn the Bible, right, because it is the book of life, you start to think that you know everything about life. All right. Knowledge puffeth up. All right. But charity edifieth. Right. So love, as we talked about last week, so I'm not going to necessarily go into love too much. Here, just a little, I'll touch on it just a little because of what verse 3 says. But understand, charity, which is real love, edifieth. All right. So don't let knowledge start to build up your pride. Keep that thing on the low. All right, keep that thing as low as possible. Stay away from pride. And if any man think that he knoweth anything, he knoweth nothing, yet as he ought to know. You see that right there? So we don't know nothing. We truly don't know anything. I'll tell you straight up. Let me plug this up first before it dies on me. All right. But I don't know anything without this word. I don't know anything without this Bible. All right. I can tell you straight up. I know nothing at all. And I would know nothing if it weren't for this word, especially about life. I wouldn't know anything about life if it wasn't for the Bible. All right. But if any man love God, the same is known of him. But if you love God, and let me just show what the love of God is real quick, keeping it basic. In 1 John, we talked about this last week, but I just want to show, anybody who may be new, maybe watching this for the first time. 1 John 5:3 tells us what the love of God is. All right. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous, right? So if you keep God's commandments, you can be known of him, all right? That's what John said in 1 John chapter 2, all right? If you keep God's commandments, you can be known of him, all right? That's the real love. That's the real charity. That's what will keep you grounded as you learn knowledge, all right? 1 John 2:3, it says, and hereby we do know that we know him if we keep his commandments. He that saith, I know him, and keepeth not his commandments, is a liar, and the truth is not in him. So if you don't keep God's commandments, and you say that you know him, you're a liar, all right? You don't know God. God is in his commandments, all right? So from there, because we did read that if any man think that he knows something, he don't know nothing. All right. So let's keep in mind in Romans 12. We're not going to read the same things that we read in Romans 12. We're going to jump up higher because last week we read a little bit out of Romans 12, but it's always good that we read these first couple of verses in Romans 12. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service, right? So it's only reasonable that Christ died for us, we should live to him, right? That's only reasonable, right? That makes sense, all right? Present your bodies a living sacrifice. And be not conformed to this world. Don't be like everyone else, but be ye transformed, be changed by the renewing of your mind, by changing the way that you think, all right? That you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God, right? So we're coming back to Romans 12. I just want to show what the will of God is, all right? Y'all should know this if y'all been watching for a while, but this is just in case you don't know it, just in case you haven't written it down, just in case there's anybody new watching, all right? Plus, it's always good because I know I can go through these lessons pretty fast, so it's always good that y'all can go back on YouTube, watch it again, take notes if you're in a position now where you can't take notes. That's why I put in the description, every class I do, get your 1611 KJV and get ready to take notes. But in Psalms 40 and verse 8, we're talking about the will of God. What is that perfect, acceptable will of God? That's what it said, right? It said good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. This is Psalms 40 and 8. I delight to do thy will, O my God. Yea, thy law is within my heart, right? So that's what it means to do the will of God, is when his laws are within you, all right? When you do his laws, that's his will, all right? So that's what a living sacrifice means. That's what living holy means. That's our reasonable service, to do everything God said to do in his laws, statutes, and commandments, all right? Verse 3. For I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think. All right? So don't think of yourself as more than you should. All right? Understand this thing. And here's what we should think of ourselves. All right? Because this whole lesson is going to be about staying humble. All right? Not even a lot of this, but some of these scriptures I talked about when I talked about Pride Month, but that was like last year. I didn't even talk about it in June of this year, right? But this is always something that we should keep in mind, not just a particular month, but throughout the year, we should keep in mind that, hey, pride is not good for you. All right. In Luke 17 and verse 10, I'll get to the point. So likewise ye, when ye shall have done all those things which are commanded you, say, we are unprofitable servants. We have done that which was our duty to do. You see that right there? So God commanded us his law, statutes, and commandments thousands of years ago, right, by the hand of Moses. All right, Christ came on the scene. He magnified the law, right? He told us, like, here's what Moses said, but here's how you actually apply it. In Matthew 5 is an example. Like with adultery, he said, look, Moses said thou shalt not commit adultery, but I say unto you that if you lust after a woman, then you've already committed adultery in your heart, right? That's just an example of how Christ magnified the law, right? So we've been living our whole lives as sinners. When we come back to God's commandments, guess what? We're still unprofitable servants because we had all those years of sin. Just because you start doing what you're supposed to do, that's what a servant was always supposed to do. You should not think highly of yourself just because you're doing what you've been told to do by our Lord. How does that make you anything special? All right, that just makes you another one of his servants. All right, that's how we should look at ourselves. We shouldn't think of ourselves as like, oh, I know this, I know that. That means I'm something. No, we're nothing. All right, look, the Lord, he made the heavens and the earth. What can you do? You can't do none of that. We're just his servants. All right, and anybody who starts to think of themselves more highly than that, then you're going off. Your pride has gotten you. All right. For I say, through the grace given unto me, this is back in Romans 12 and verse 3. For I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly. You see that right there? So once you start, and this is with a lot of different church leaders, a lot of different Israelite leaders as well, all right, is that once they get in a position of authority, they start thinking that there's something. We're still unprofitable servants. We're not back to where we need to be. We had the kingdom at one point. When you look at the history of the children of Israel, during the days of David and Solomon, we had the kingdom of the Lord over Israel, right? But we fell away from his commandments and lost it. All right, we're going to read about that later. All right. So even when we get the kingdom back, we're just back to where we're supposed to be. We're still unprofitable servants. All right. So we shouldn't be thinking that, we can lord over brothers or anything like that. That we are a special attraction, all right? We ain't nothing. We're his servants. That's it, all right? But to think soberly, right? Don't get drunk with power. Don't get drunk with pride, but think soberly. According as God had dealt to every man the measure of faith, right? So it's different measures of faith for different people. We got to understand that. It's different levels of knowledge for different people. We got to understand that. Does that mean the brother who is more knowledgeable is of more caliber than the brother who is not? No. We're different members of the same body. All right? For as we have many members in one body, and all members have not the same office. All right? So we got to keep that in mind. All right? That not everybody can be the eyes. Not everybody can be the ears. Not everybody can be the fingers or the toes. Does that mean that the fingers are better than the toes? Of course not. All right? It's all a part of the same body. All right? So just because like a brother is a leader and this brother over here is a follower, that doesn't mean that the leader is better than the follower. We're all the servants of the Lord. All right? I'm just speaking of experience with brothers who come into the truth who maybe they don't have all the knowledge, right? Maybe they're not as well-read or as eloquent as some other brothers, but the charity and the faith that those brothers who are not as eloquent have, man, that's a desirable trait. That's a beautiful thing. They're not any less than the brother who, does have all the knowledge and is more eloquent. Meanwhile, he's probably sitting behind the scenes. All right? So from there, let me get to Sirach 10. I got it pulled up over here. The book of Ecclesiasticus in the Apocrypha, chapter 10, starting with verse 7. Pride is hateful before God and man, and by both doth one commit iniquity. right? So people, especially here in America, they say, I'm proud to be an American, right? Like that's hateful before God and men. Men around the world, they hate to hear that, all right? But God also hates to hear that. Not only that, people talking about, I'm proud of my job. I'm proud of what I've done. I'm proud of my kids. I'm proud of my heritage, right? People in the, even people in the so-called truth. Israelites talking about, I'm proud to be an Israelite. You don't understand God. You don't understand the Bible, all right? Because that pride, just thinking that, is going to lead you down to sin. And we're about to get that, all right? Because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. You see that right there. So that's the way that you lose the kingdom, by being proud. All right. Why is earth and ashes proud? There is not a more wicked thing than a covetous man. For such a one setteth his own soul to sell, because while he liveth, he cast away his bowels. Right. So that's what these people in Hollywood be doing, selling their souls and casting away their bowels. Right. They've been doing all sorts of wickedness. Cast away his bowels, as in like go to the Diddy parties and stuff. But the point is, why is people who are just the dust of the earth, right? We're the beasts of the field. Why are we proud about anything? We shouldn't be, right? Because we're no better than the animals. We still die, right? Just like they do, all right? The physician cut off a long disease, and he that is today a king, tomorrow shall die, right? So Sirach saying, or I should say, Jesus, the son of Sirach, is saying the same thing as far as like, we're all going to die, right? So why should we be proud about anything? All right? Just serve God. When a man is dead, he shall inherit creeping things, beasts, and worms, right? So he said, look, we're all meeting the same fate. You shouldn't be proud of your position, proud of what you got, right? The beginning of pride is when one departeth from God. You see that right there. So when you begin to develop pride, you're leaving God. All right, you're drawing further away from God, right? And that's why Paul had to put you on notice that, hey, knowledge puffeth up. Really, when you start learning things, if you're not checking yourself, if you're not examining yourself, making sure that you stay humble, then you could be learning so much things that you're actually drawing further and further away from God. Meanwhile, you think you're getting closer and closer to Him, but that pride is building up. And it's actually, he's pushing you further away because you start to think that you don't need him anymore. All right, that's how some people think. They start to learn things, they think like, oh, now I'm better than my brother or whatever. No. For pride is the beginning of sin. Pride is the beginning of sin. All sin begins with pride. All right, thinking that God won't judge me for this. He'll forgive me for this. All right, or thinking, well, God don't care if I do this. That's pride. All right, and he that hath it shall pour out abomination. You see that right there. That's your friend of mine, old DJT, oh President Trump, always in his pride, talking about some foolishness. Like every time you turn him on, he always says something silly, something stupid. And therefore the Lord brought upon them strange calamities and overthrew them utterly. You see that right there? So the scripture's already telling you the end of all of this, what it's going to be. The Lord's going to overthrow this place utterly. But just looking back at, say, like Nebuchadnezzar, when you read the Bible, he was in the book of Daniel. He had so much pride and arrogance because he was the king of Babylon. God made him Pharaoh, right? Made him live among beasts for a while, just to humble him down. All right? You read about that in Daniel chapter 4. We're not going to get it, but that's just an example. All right. The Lord had cast down the thrones of proud princes and set up the meek in their stead. You see that right there? So the Lord will set up the meek in the stead of the proud princes. And we'll get that later. We'll get that a little later. The Lord hath plucked up the roots of the proud nations and planted the lowly in their place. You see that right there? So, not only has it happened in the past, it will happen in the future. That God will take the meek of the earth, the lowly of the earth, the humble of the earth, and put them in positions of power instead of the proud and arrogant people that's ruling now. All right? The Lord overthrew countries of the heathen and destroyed them to the foundations of the earth, because that's how it always works. Every nation, every empire grows to the point where God gets sick of their sins and then he destroys them. All right? He overthrows them, usually by one people to another. That's what happened with pretty much all kingdoms and empires before now, except in the case of ancient Egypt, right? God overthrew them personally to bring out his people, right? That's why this place is called spiritual Egypt, all right? Let's see. He took some of them away and destroyed them and hath made their memorial to cease from the earth. Pride was not made for men, nor furious anger for them that are born of a woman. You see that right there? So God didn't make pride nor furious anger, right? That's a lust, that's an enticement, that's a temptation from the devil, all right? They that fear the Lord are a sure seed. And I specifically wanted to get to this verse because Gad had pointed something out about this verse that has resonated with me. He said it like a few weeks ago at this point. They that fear the Lord are a sure seed, and they that love him an honorable plant. They that disregard the law are a dishonorable seed. They that transgress the commandments are a deceivable seed. You see that right there? So it's the same thing with people who are proud, all right? And this is for anybody who transgressed the commandments. But we know, according to the verses earlier, that pride is the beginning of sin, right? So anyone who gets proud, anyone who is lifted up in their pride, lifted up in their arrogance, they have only deceived themselves, right? They've deceived themselves into thinking, as Paul said, that they are something, right? So what did he say? Think of himself more highly, right? They just think of themselves highly, right? That's deceit, all right? You've deceived yourself into thinking you are something when you're nothing, right? That's what he said in 1 Corinthians 8, all right? Among brethren, he that is chief is honorable, so are they that fear the Lord in his eyes, right? So fearing God, serving him, obeying him, that's what he finds honorable. As we just read up here, it said they that love him are an honorable plant, all right? And you see just by the opposite here, as it says, they that regard not the law are dishonorable, meaning they that regard the law will be honorable, all right? Verse 21, the fear of the Lord goeth before the obtaining the obtaining of authority, right? The fear of the Lord goeth before the obtaining of authority. All right, so God will, if you truly show God that you will serve him, he will put you in a position where you have a bit of pull, right? You got a bit of sway, as they like to say today. But roughness and pride is the losing thereof, right? But as soon as you start to think of yourself more highly than you ought to think, you start mistreating people under you, God's going to take it away from you, all right? So from there, let's get 1 Samuel 2. 1 Samuel, the 2nd chapter. This is the prayer of Hannah, I'm pretty sure. 1 Samuel chapter 2, and verse 3. She says, talk no more so exceeding proudly. Let not arrogancy come out of your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. You see that right there? So, God does not want to hear all this proud speech, all this talk of pride or arrogancy. God is a God of knowledge, and he loves to see you put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. All right? He loves to see you perform your actions, right? More specifically, perform his word with your actions. All right? So from there, let's go to Proverbs chapter 8. Proverbs chapter 8. And we'll read verse 13. Proverbs 8 and verse 13. It says, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride and arrogancy and the evil way and the froward mouth do I hate. You see that? God hates pride. He hates arrogancy. He hates evil. All right? Let's go over to chapter 6. Talk a little bit, get a little bit more detail into that, I should say. Proverbs chapter 6. We'll start with verse 16, all right? Verse 16. It says, "These 6 things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him." Right? Meaning they're disgusting and vile in his sight, hateful in his sight. A proud look. So he said that's where it starts. He said it starts with the pride. It starts with a proud look. A lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among brethren. Right? So those 7 things God hates. But he started it off by talking about pride. God hates pride. All right? And let's go to Psalms 138. All right? Because the Lord knows all things, right? And we talked about in 1 John 2, it says that a man doesn't know God, and God doesn't know that person if you don't keep his commandments, right? That just means you don't have a relationship with God, right? God knows all things. He still sees you. He just don't really like dealing with you. He don't want to deal with you if you got pride, all right? In Psalms 138 and verse 6, it says, "Though the Lord be high, yet hath he respect unto the lowly," right? So he is the most high, right? You can't get nothing above him. You can't get any more wise than him. You can't know more things than him. You can't be more powerful than him, right? He is the most high, but he has respect unto the lowly, all right? But the proud, he knoweth afar off, right? He's like, yeah, I know, I've heard about such and such, but they're arrogant. I don't like them. They're prideful. I don't like them, all right? Now, this person right here who's meek and humble, that's what I'm dealing with. That's my guy, right? That's my girl. That's how God looks at it, all right? I do just want to say this isn't about like the LGBT pride or whatever, but that's not biblical. Obviously, that's sin as well. So I'll touch on that briefly, but I mainly just wanted to get into like arrogancy type pride, right? We'll deal with that real quick though. The types of people who have pride, right? In Isaiah 3 and verse 9, the show of their countenance doth witness against them. They declare their sin as Sodom. They hide it not. Woe unto their soul, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves. You see that right there? You see what God said about the so-called LGBTQ plus community. They declare their sin as Sodom. They don't even hide it, right? It was, I should say, like even like a century ago, like they would hide it. They would like sneak around and do it. And it was like that for oftentimes it was like that through ancient times as well, depending on civilization, right? But Sodom, they were just out, right? They were just out and about, and they would, declare their sin, right? They did not care who knew about it, all right? It's the same thing today, right? That's why this is also called spiritual Sodom. All right, in Revelation 11, it said this is spiritual Sodom, spiritual Egypt. All right. So they declare their sin as Sodom. They hide it not. All right, they out, and they ain't going back in the closet, so to speak. All right. So let's go to Romans 1. Let's deal with Romans 1. And like I said, this lesson ain't really about like gay people necessarily, but I do just want to point out that like that's not biblical. That's going against God. That is a sin. All right. Seems like a lot of people are afraid to say that these days. Let's see. I'll start with 24. I'll start with Romans 1 and 24. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts. Right. So that's where it comes from. It's a lust of the heart. Right. So you say like, oh, but God is love. How is love wrong? Well, loving people you're supposed to do, right? It's the having sex with them part that God has a problem with. The sexual immorality, the sexual promiscuity. By the way, heterosexual promiscuity God has a problem with too. All right, God ordains marriage. That's what He ordained between a man and a woman. That's what He ordained. None of this like being a whoremonger, a man going out here having sex with a bunch of different women. All right. Woman going out here having sex with a bunch of different men. God does not ordain that either. Let me just be clear about that. God did not ordain adultery. Obviously, he said, thou shalt not commit adultery. All right. So I'm not condoning none of that either. Because you do have a lot of people in Christianity who will be the first to bash gay people. Meanwhile, they're cheating on their wife, right? Or they are having sex with another man's wife, right? All that's wicked. Obviously, you can't be a hypocrite. All right, so just do no sin. How about that? Just keep all God's commandments. How about that? All right. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. That's dishonor to your body. All right. To be a fornicator in general. All right, that's what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 3. Who changed the truth of God into a lie and worshiped and served the creature more than the creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Right, so that would be idolatry. All right, that's where it started with the pride, right, and then spiritual fornication came in through idolatry. All right, and then from there, all other wickedness abounds. All right. For this cause, God gave them up unto vile affections. For even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. Right? It's against nature to be woman with woman. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another. Men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error, which was meat. Right? Like that AIDS. Right? The AIDS spread among mainly, initially, homosexual men. All right. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, right? They just would rather be secular, is what the world calls it today, or atheist. God gave them over to a reprobate mind, right? So God just gave them, he said, look, hey, y'all have at it. Y'all just gonna burn. Y'all just want to forsake the Lord. Okay. Just do what you're going to do. And you're going to burn when them nukes come. All right. To do those things which are not convenient, right? Because you have to do all this extra type of stuff to be sexual in that manner, right? You have to get like lube and like all that other kind of stuff. With women, you got to get like strap-ons and things like that. Being filled with all unrighteousness, so all manner of sin. Fornication, right? That's the first thing when talking about the LGBTQ plus community is fornication. All right, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, right? They talk about the tea or the gossip. All right, haters of God, they hate God. Despiteful, proud, boasters, right? There's a reason why they chose that word pride to be their to be on their flag, to be there to represent them and their way of life, their beliefs. All right, is because they know that is directly against God. All right, whether they know it like consciously or whether it's a subconscious, just spiritual thing, regardless, they chose that for a reason. Boasters, inventors of evil things, right? That's what I was just talking about with the toys and things. Disobedient to parents, right? Because most of those people's parents would not have them in that situation. Now you're getting, I guess, like millennial parents and even like Gen X parents who are okay with it, right? Without understanding, they don't understand God, they don't understand the Bible. Covenant breakers, right? Not trustworthy people. Without natural affection, right? They get to the point where they don't even want the heterosexual relationship anymore. Implacable. Implacable is unable to be placated. That's what that means. Unable to be placated, right? Could not be soothed, could not ease the anger, all right? Unmerciful, right? As we was reading up here as far as wickedness, maliciousness, malignity, right? That goes into all manner of malice and hatred, all right? Who knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them, right? So not only the actual gay people themselves, but the quote unquote allies, right? All that stems from the idolatrous mindset, all right? Focusing on things other than God, all right? That's that whole pride movement. That's that whole pride mindset, all right? From there, also concerning pride, you can't talk about pride without talking about Esau, all right? And his pride, as I mentioned earlier, proud to be an American, right? Let's see. Jeremiah 49. We rarely go here concerning, because this is basically the same prophecies that are in Obadiah. But I like this, and Obadiah might say the same thing here, but I like how Jeremiah put it in Jeremiah 49. We're going to start with verse 7 and then jump down. All right? Jeremiah 49, starting with verse 7. Concerning Edom, thus saith the Lord of hosts, is wisdom no more in Teman? Is counsel perished from the prudent? Is their wisdom vanished? Right, so Edom is the so-called Caucasians or European colonizers, whatever, the descendants of those colonizations, right? But all that started, all the major Edomite civilizations started from Greece, right? Known for their profound philosophy and wisdom, right? So he said, is wisdom no more in Teman? Like, aren't y'all supposed to be wise? Aren't y'all supposed to be bright, right? Is their wisdom vanished? Jumping down to 16, because you look at people today in America specifically, and it's very foolish. Like, they're very ignorant here in America, people in general. All right. So jumping down to verse 16. Thy terribleness hath deceived thee, and the pride of thy heart, O thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock. Right? Because originally they lived in Mount Seir, right? The clefts of the rock. But also in the Caucasus Mountains, a lot of people stayed during the Middle Ages. And not only that, but the Alps and the Neander Valley under the Alps. All right? The clefts of the rock. That holdest the height of the hill. Though thou should make thy nest as high as the eagle, I will bring thee down from thence, saith the Lord. Right? So you can build your skyscrapers, you can stay in your penthouse, right? God said he's going to bring you down. Right? The pride of thy heart hath deceived thee. All right? Just as I was reading in Sirach 10 about those who, what did it say? Are a deceivable seed. In Sirach 10 and verse 21, not 21, 19, they that transgress the commandments are a deceivable seed. All right? It's the same thing, right? The pride that leads to sin and iniquity will make you to deceive yourself, right? And that is what's happened with Esau. That's what's happened with America. That's what's happened with Trump, right? He thinks he can do whatever and there's not going to be any consequences. But what he's really doing prophetically is building to World War III, building to the nuclear bombs. Even if it's not him who does it, it'll be the person after him or the person after that. The signs of the times are here. We see it unfold. We see the prophecy unfolding day after day. All right? If you're in the know, then you know. Also, Edom shall be a desolation. God said he's going to destroy this place. All right? When you read Revelation 18, it talks about the fall of America. All right? That alongside Isaiah 47. All right? Those two chapters specifically, there's many more. But those two specifically talk about the fall of America. It's called Babylon the Great, aka the daughter of Babylon, the great whore in Revelation. All right? Also, Edom shall be a desolation. Everyone that goeth by it shall be astonished, and shall hiss at all the plagues thereof, as in the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah. All right? So I wanted to bring that back because, again, spiritual Sodom. Right? You see those things popping off over here. Since I think it was 2015, gay marriage was made legal over here. All right? As in the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah and the neighbor cities thereof, saith the Lord, no man shall abide there, neither shall a son of man dwell in it. You see that right there. So specifically, America is going to be uninhabitable because of the nukes that are coming. because of the fire that is coming. It will be uninhabitable over here. All right. Again, Revelation 18, I talked about that this past Sabbath Eve, right? Friday night. From there, let's get Leviticus 26. And we're almost done. I just want to go through Leviticus 26. I don't want to read the whole chapter, but I am going to jump around. I want to read the gist, so to speak, of the whole chapter in Leviticus 26, just so we can understand. Just so we can understand why we are in the place we are today, literally, but also metaphorically. All right? The Israelites, as we're about to read here, have been scattered all over the world in various forms of captivity in various places. All right? Over here in the West, the Israelites are known as the bywords of so-called Black, Latino, and Native American primarily. But there's a remnant of the children of Israel in all lands, in every nation. All right? And we're about to read why that is. In Leviticus 26, starting with verse 3, and like I said, I'm going to skip around. If you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and do them, right? So we made a covenant with God that if we kept his commandments, jumping down to verse 9, for I will have respect unto you and make you fruitful and multiply you and establish my covenant with you, right? So he would bless us greatly if we kept his commandments, all right? Excuse me. And he would establish his covenant with us. All right, verse 12. And I will walk among you and will be your God, and ye shall be my people. All right. You saw this during the days of David specifically. Also during the days of Joshua. As far as even specifically God walking among us. All right. I have to get into that at some point because that's pretty deep, but it's also literal. All right. The captain of the Lord's host. All right. What we know as Jesus Christ, the Son of God. He showed up to Joshua. All right. And he spoke with him personally, face to face. All right, it's the same with during the days of David. All right, the Lord was out there fighting the battle with David. That's why David never lost a battle, as far as I can tell. He was literally out there with him, fighting with him. All right, and again, I gotta prove that at some point. But as of now, this is the blessing that God said he would do with us if we kept his commandments. He said he will walk among you and will be your God, and ye shall be my people. I am the Lord your God, which brought you forth out of the land of Egypt, that ye should not be their bondmen. Right? It was never supposed to be the case that we went into captivity again, or at least that's not what God wanted for us. All right? And I have broken the bands of your yoke and made you go upright. You said it right there. So he said, look, I brought you out of captivity. I don't want you to go back into bondage and back into slavery ever again. All right? Verse 14, but if you will not hearken unto me and will not do all these commandments, and if ye shall despise my statutes, or if your soul abhor my judgments, so that ye will not do all my commandments, but that you break my covenant, I also will do this unto you. I will even appoint over you terror, consumption, and the burning ague, that shall consume the eyes and cause sorrow of heart, and ye shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. You see that right there. So he said, look, I'm going to bring your enemies into your land to take it over, to eat your crops, eat your, to devour your resources, right? If you break my covenant. And I will set my face against you, and ye shall be slain before your enemies. They that hate you shall reign over you, and ye shall flee when none pursueth you. You see it right there. So is that not what's happening here in America as far as ye shall be slain before your enemies, right? And they that hate you shall reign over you, right? We see that very plainly today, right? We see the cops and ICE and all these kind of people kill what's known as the so-called blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans. And especially we see the hatred for the Latinos right now, all right? As far as the ICE, the mass deportations of people who, in some cases, are American citizens, and they just don't care. If you fit the profile, if you fit the racial profile, you're getting up out of here, right? If they just so happen to grab you. All right, it is what it is. All right. It said, ye shall flee when none pursueth you. Like, even at like protests and things like that, they throw the tear gas and they're not like chasing you, but you're still fleeing when none's chasing you. All right. Verse 18, and if ye will not yet for all this hearken unto me, then I will punish you 7 times more for your sins. Right. So it's just going to get worse and worse. If you don't turn back to God, it's just going to get worse and worse. All right. And I will break the pride of your power, and I will make your heaven as iron and your earth as brass. You see that right there. So he said, look, if you keep your pride, I'm going to break it. You're not going to be able to keep your pride. All right. You're going to try to hold on to it, but I'm going to break it. I'm going to destroy it. I'm going to destroy you alongside with your pride. All right. You better put it to the side. If not, I mean, he tells you straight up, you're going to die. All right. Make your heaven as iron and your earth as brass. That's twofold, as in like the same way that iron does not yield rain and that brass does not bring forth fruit. All right. So he's saying your land won't be fruitful, but also like iron shackles, brass shackles. All right. So jumping down to verse 23. And if ye will not be reformed by me by these things, but will walk contrary unto me, then will I also walk contrary unto you, and will punish you yet 7 times for your sins. You see that right there. So he said, it's just going to get worse and worse. And I will bring a sword upon you that shall avenge the quarrel of my covenant. You see that right there. So when he said, I will bring a sword upon you, let me just give you a precept for that. The sword that God will bring upon you in this context, in Psalms 17 and 13. I don't have it written down. I don't know why I'm looking down. On Psalm 17 and verse 13, I believe that's what it is. Let's see. Yes, so Psalm 17 and 13, he said, arise, O Lord, disappoint him, cast him down, deliver my soul from the wicked, which is thy sword. So the wicked people is God's sword. Right? He will use them to avenge the quarrel of his covenant. Right? That's what we saw with the so-called conquistadors who came over here, the colonizers who came over here. Right? They were doing wicked things to the Israelites who were already over here. All right? Because the people that were over here left God's covenant. All right? I talked about that as far as the... By the way, go check out the breakdown. Go check out the 12 tribes breakdown. 400 plus minutes with added resources. I should say additional sources, as well as the Bible. Obviously, the Word of God is the foundation. All right. But that's what happened with the people that were over here in the West. God brought the wicked against the people over here to avenge the quarrel of my covenant. And when you are gathered together within your cities, I will send the pestilence among you, right? And that came in the form of influenza, typhus, smallpox, right? That was the biggest one, who wiped out the quote unquote indigenous, all right, the northern kingdom Israelites that were over here. And ye shall be delivered into the hand of the enemy, right? And that's what happened. So jumping down to verse 30. It says, and I will destroy your high places. You see it right there. So God said, look, and I'm going to read the next part, and cut down your images and cast your carcasses upon the carcasses of your idols, and my soul shall abhor you. You see that right there. So God said, look, all of your pagan customs, your pagan idolatry customs that you were keeping, all that's going to be destroyed. Your religions that you turn to in spite of me, I'm going to destroy. All right. And then Deuteronomy 28, it says that, you'd be forced to worship wood and stone, right? You'd be forced to worship the God of your enemies, all right? And my soul shall abhor you, and I will make your cities waste and bring your sanctuaries unto desolation. And I will not smell the savor of your sweet odors, right? Because you have like voodoo and like Santeria, which are like sacrificing unto devils. Really, they may think that they're sacrificing unto God, but he said, I will not smell the savor of your sweet odors. Right? And I will bring the land into desolation, and your enemies which dwell therein shall be astonished at it. You see that right there? So the people are amazed that this is such a great land, and what happened to this people that were destroyed and taken out of it. All right? And I will scatter you among the heathen. All right? And will draw out a sword after you, and your land shall be desolate, and your cities waste. All right, so initially this happened within the land of Israel. Happened to the northern kingdom first, and then to the southern kingdom. But also over here on this side, all right, happened to the northern kingdom first, and then to the southern kingdom, right? Happened to Joseph, and then to Judah, all right? So the indigenous that was over here that represented Joseph, they got took out first. Then Judah came over here on the slave ships, all right? That's why he said, I will scatter you among the heathen, right? God used slave ships to do that. And will draw out a sword after you, and your land shall be desolate, and your cities waste. But again, initially, that happened within the land of Israel. But, as Gad likes to bring out all the time, judgment is a ring when it comes to God. Where is that? I think it's 2 Ezra 5. I could be mistaken. But I think that it's 2 Ezra 5 and in the 40s. I could be mistaken, but I think that's where it's at. No, here it is, 2 Ezra 5 and 42. And he said unto me, I will liken my judgment unto a ring, like as there is no slackness of the last, even so there is no swiftness of the first. Right? So a ring, right, is circular, right? As people like to say, time is a flat circle, right? Because things keep happening the same thing, the same way that it used to be, right? That's biblical. The things come back around, right? So the same way that these plagues, I guess they're called in Leviticus 26, curses they're called in Deuteronomy 28, they last forever, all right? They last forever until you break the cycle, right? You break the ring by coming back to God, all right? And he's about to say that here. Verse 34, then shall the land enjoy her Sabbaths as long as it lieth desolate, right? That happened during the land lay desolate for the 70 years that, I guess it was 70 plus years, but specifically the land being desolate for 70 years, as Jeremiah prophesied after Jerusalem was destroyed in 587 BC, thereabout. Maybe it's 586. But it's when Babylon destroyed Jerusalem. And ye be in your enemy's land, right? When the people were in Babylon. Even then shall the land rest and enjoy her Sabbaths. As long as it lieth desolate, it shall rest, because it did not rest in your Sabbaths when you dwelt upon it, right? Because the people were not keeping God's high holy days anymore. All right? And upon them that are left alive of you, I will send a faintness into their hearts in the land of their enemies, and the sound of a shaken leaf shall chase them. And they shall flee as fleeing from a sword, and they shall fall when none pursueth. Right? So like, just think the mentality of, like, I had mentioned slavery and colonization, right? So we'll look at the colonization standpoint of, here come all these like British, French, Spanish, came over here, and the people are like hiding, right? They're running and hiding. The people would often flee to the mountains, right? The so-called indigenous would often flee to the mountains, right? So they would be hiding, whether it be in a cave or in in the woods, right, in the forest. And then they hear something like a broken twig or like a leaf, as it said, and they think it's the Spaniards, so they take off running, right? They're tripping all over each other, falling over each other. They take off running. Meanwhile, it was just, a shaking leaf, right? Now you look at the slavery aspect, right? You have people who would flee from the plantations, hiding out in the woods or whatever, and same situation, all right? They think that the master is coming to get them, right? So they're kind of like faintness, as it says, faintness into their hearts. They're very fearful of the situation, and could be a broken twig or a shaken leaf. Then they start running, tripping all over each other, falling all over each other. All right. Fleeing from, they shall flee as fleeing from a sword, and they shall fall when none pursueth. Verse 37, and they shall fall one upon another as it were before a sword when none pursueth, and ye shall have no power to stand before your enemies. And see, this is the point. Ye shall have no power to stand before your enemies. Why? Because God is our power. All right? Without the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we have nothing. All right? Without our God, we have nothing. All right? And ye shall perish among the heathen, and the land of your enemies shall eat you up. Right? Is that not what's happening right now to the so-called Latinos? Right? Getting eat up by the land here in America. All right? Enemies chasing them, taking them, spewing them out, so to speak. And they that are left of you shall pine away in their iniquity in your enemies' lands. And also in the iniquities of their fathers shall they pine away with them, right? Because they're carrying the religion that was taught to them by the slave master, right? That was taught to them by their fathers, right? So, same with the Spaniards, they brought the Catholics, or rather they brought Catholicism. Catholicism is still being kept among so-called Latinos today, most of them, right? And even with the British and French, they were like, say, different type of like Baptist and Methodist, different type of Protestant religions that they give to their slaves, and they still carry on those traditions today. All right. Also, in the iniquity of their fathers shall they pine away with them. Verse 40. If they shall confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their fathers with their trespass, which they trespassed against me, and that also they have walked contrary unto me. So if we acknowledge our offense, as another scripture say, and that I also have walked contrary unto them. So we got to acknowledge that because we left God, he left us. All right? And have brought them into the land of their enemies. If then their uncircumcised hearts be humbled, the opposite of pride. God said, look, if you have the opposite of pride, then you'll be good. You'll be all right. All right? With that in mind, because there's a couple scriptures I didn't get to go to that I skipped right over. In Matthew 5:5, concerning the meek. The meek. All right? All praises to the Most High. He put the Spirit on me to remember, right? He said he'll bring all things to our remembrance. In Matthew 5:5, he said, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. All right, so let's look up meek real quick. It said, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. All right? So, quiet, gentle, and easily imposed on. All right? I want more right here. All right. Let's look at these synonyms, because even this, submissive is a good word, but quiet, gentle, that's good. But easily imposed on, it's almost like it's a negative connotation, right? But look at these words here. Patient, long-suffering, forbearing, resigned, gentle, quiet, shy, retiring, reverent, peaceful, peaceable, docile. Let's look down. Humble, lowly. All right. Those are some of the words that we've been reading how God wants us to be. All right. Humble and lowly. That's the meek. All right. Submissive. Obedient is the word I was looking for. That's the word I generally think of when considering meekness. But also humble and lowly. All right. Humble, lowly, and obedient. All right. Blessed are the meek, those who obey God, those who are humble in his sight, the lowly, for they shall inherit the earth. All right? The earth, right now, currently, is given to the hands of the wicked. But guess what? As we were reading in Sirach 10, there's going to be a transfer of power. All right? Christ is going to come to establish his kingdom here on earth and give it to the meek. All right? Let's go to Matthew 18. That's what he talks about when he's talking about the kingdom of heaven. Just like he said in the Lord's Prayer, our Father which art in heaven, thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. All right. I forgot the hallowed be thy name part, but y'all get the point. In Matthew 18 and verse 3, he said, and said, verily I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Right? So let's look at converted real quick. Just real quick. Y'all should know this if y'all been watching for a while. If not, then take notes. All right? Even if you have been watching for a while and you don't know it, it's because you ain't been taking notes, more than likely. And Psalms 19 and verse 7. The book of Psalms, chapter 19 and verse 7. Concerning being converted. All right, what does it mean to be converted in God's eyes? First of all, the word converted means changed, but how does God want us to change? In Psalms 19 and verse 7, he said, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul, right? So if you want your soul to change, if you want your soul to be converted, then keep the laws of the Lord. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple, right? If you're simple now, you will become wise, all right? But Christ said, except you be converted and become as little children, right? So except you be changed according to the laws of God and become like little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, the same is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, right? So that's what he meant when he said be born again, right? You got to become like a little child. Become obedient the way a little child is obedient to their parents. Now, he ain't talking about some badass little kids, all right? He's talking about little children who received the correction, who received the instruction, all right? You can tell them, and they may ask questions like, why? But they're not going to refute the information that you give them, all right? They're going to be humble. All right, from there, let's go back to Leviticus 26. We'll close it out. I'll start with 40 again. If they shall confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their fathers with their trespass, which they trespassed against me, and that also they have walked contrary unto me, and that I also have walked contrary unto them, and have brought them into the land of their enemies, right? So we got to understand that this is God who did this to us for our sins. That's what we got to understand. If then their uncircumcised hearts be humbled, and they then accepted the punishment of their iniquity, we got to accept our punishment, that it was just, that we agreed to this. All right? Then will I remember my covenant with Jacob, and also my covenant with Isaac, and also my covenant with Abraham will I remember, and I will remember the land. You see that right there? So that's why the kingdom, the holy city, is called New Jerusalem, because it's going to be in Jerusalem, but it's going to be new. It's going to be better. All right? The land also shall be left of them and shall enjoy her Sabbaths. Right? That, as I had mentioned, that happened between around 586 BC to 516 BC. It all happened during the 6th century BC. While she lieth desolate without them, and they shall accept of the punishment of their iniquity, because they despised my judgments, and because their soul abhorred my statutes, right? Because we hated God's laws. And yet for all that, when they be in the land of their enemies, I will not cast them away, neither will I abhor them to destroy them utterly. So in the captivities, right, in the different places where we have been scattered, God will not diminish us. No, on the contrary, he will populate us and make us like the sand of the sea. All right? That's why they want to get the so-called Latinos out of America, because they see the population numbers and they say, well, America's going to become brown and speaking Spanish in the next 20, 30 years. They say, we can't have that. We got to get the people out. It's not about gangs. It's not about MS-13 or Trendel Ragua or whatever they're saying now. They're just trying to get out the brown people, specifically the Israelites. All right? Yet for all that, when they be in the land of their enemies, I will not cast them away. Neither will I abhor them to destroy them utterly, and to break my covenant with them. For I am the Lord their God. But I will for their sakes remember the covenant of their ancestors. He said, I'm going to remember my agreement to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that their seed would inherit the land. He said, I'm not turning my back on them, because Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob served him faithfully. All right? And God's going to remember that covenant to 1,000 generations. All right? Forever and ever. Whom I brought forth out of the land of Egypt in the sight of the heathen, that I might be their God. I am the Lord, right? So he said, look, I'm going to remember the people that I brought out of Egypt. Even though they were wicked and turned against God in the wilderness, their children in the generation of Joshua took the land, right, in righteousness. All right. These are the statutes and the judgments and laws which the Lord made between him and the children of Israel in Mount Sinai by the hand of Moses. All right. So understand that. The end of the law, the end of the covenant is humbling yourself, all right, acknowledging that we have sinned against God and turning back to him, all right, putting that pride to the side. Why? Because pride is the devil. So be not puffed up. With that, I'm going to close it out with Mark 14. Hope y'all learned something. Mark 14. And yeah, I'm trying to, I don't know if y'all noticed over these past few weeks, but I'm trying to keep it basic. I'm not trying to get any, like, kind of deep, talk about deep things, because we still need the basics, all right? We still need the basics. We still need to overcome sin and keep the commandments of God, now more than ever. Mark 14, starting with verse 3. And being in Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at meat, there came a woman having an alabaster box of ointment of spikenard, very precious, and she brake the box and poured it on his head. And there were some that had indignation within themselves, and said, Why was this waste of the ointment made? For it might have been sold for more than 300 pence, and have been given to the poor. And they murmured against her. And Jesus said, Let her alone. Why trouble ye her? She hath wrought a good work on me. For ye have the poor with you always, and whensoever ye will, ye may do them good. But me ye have not always. She hath done what she could. She has come beforehand to anoint my body to the burying. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached throughout the whole world, this also that she hath done shall be spoken of for a memorial of her. So with that, hope y'all learned something. I'm going to say shalom and let God be magnified.